Well, and we are back at 3:30 Eastern Time, and I'm very excited to introduce our next keynote speaker, Dave Melhado, Vice President of Music and Marketing at UnitedMasters. And this conversation will be moderated by Mr. Carl Folks, who is founder and managing partner of the Folks firm. Thank you, gentlemen, so much for joining MEIEA at this 43rd Summit. Welcome, and I'm just going to let you guys take it from here. Thank you.
Thank you, Armin. Appreciate it. Thank you. Looking forward to this conversation. Dave, your experience, is right. It's perfect for the new age conversation in the music business, right? Distribution, technology, disruption. You've done that in your career personally. And then, obviously UnitedMasters is definitely at the forefront of getting things going. So a little bit of run the show, just going to briefly introduce myself a little bit more and then kind of get into Dave's background, and then we'll get into the conversation. My background, I'm an entertainment lawyer, been practicing for 5 years. Music producers, artists, record labels, management companies that are all using my firm's services. And I'm also an adjunct professor at Drexel University in Philly. At Drexel, I've taught classes like copyright law, hip hop evolution, contracts in the music industry, just a broad base of entertainment courses. So that's my background. And then now, getting into Dave's wonderful background and getting to the convo. Dave, as Armin mentioned earlier, Dave is head of artist marketing at UM. And obviously UnitedMasters being a leader in the distribution space. Steve and Dave and everybody at UM has been doing a lot of cool stuff with artists like NLE Choppa, Coltrane, Toby Ingwe, Lena Baraz, all sorts of people who've been sort of leading the independent distribution model. Before that, Dave was a talent manager, and he also helped launch Atlanta-based distribution startup company StreamCut. StreamCut, was home where he signed and developed Gunna. Gunna right now is at the forefront of hip hop and trap and R&B. And before that, Dave was artist manager. So a very diverse background, in tech, in music, in media, and leading up to his stuff at UnitedMasters. So UM, we're going to start there, Dave. I want to ask you, in 2022, the buzzword, I think, in music, has been probably for the past couple of years is distribution. What is distribution? And how has that changed over the course of the past 10 to 20 years?
Yeah. Excuse me. Yeah. Great question. And really excited to be able to speak here at MEIEA. Been thinking about this conference for a couple of weeks now, and just kind of thinking about what is it that I wanted to make sure that you could leave here with. So when you think about distribution, historically in the music business, you needed a record company to be able to reach the masses, right? And the record companies controlled all means of what they call distribution. And whether it was physical product, or leading to iTunes when iTunes initially launched, you had to go through a record company to be able to get there, right? So for an artist early on in their career, for them to make music their career, they had to get signed to a record company. So with technology, that has changed significantly. You start to see artists from the DIY artist that, is doing music leisurely and, is passionate about it, to the professional artists now can bypass a major label in order to put their music out to the world. But they need to go through a music distribution company. And there's tons of them that have started to come about. And essentially what a music distribution company does is deliver the music to the streaming platforms and also the social platforms that use music, right? So for an artist that is making music in their bedroom, they can log on to a platform like UnitedMasters, and in a couple of days, their music is live on platform. For an artist that is more established, like a Chance the Rapper, who we work with, can work with our team to deliver marketing strategies, to deliver a streaming strategy, and get their music out to the world.
Got it. So even, touching on that a little bit, kind of just, distribution in 2022, getting music to all the digital retailers out there, the streaming platforms out there. That's definitely one thing. But, you kind of hinted at it, right? You kind of hinted that there's a lot of companies right now out in the distribution space. And then, you factor in the distribution companies, then you factor in the record labels. There's a lot of partners out there for artists in their teams to choose from. What does a good distributor look like in 2022? And how do you separate yourself from the crowd?
Yeah. And I think like distribution isn't one size fit all for every artist. I think for every artist, they're looking for something different, right? Or they're looking for something that's uniquely fits them, right? And to your point, there are a lot of distribution companies out there, right? But I also don't believe that distribution is a winner take all kind of business, right? There's the DIY distribution platforms where artists can log onto a website and they never talk to anyone, right? They're what I call the utilities of the music business. Like they're the tech utilities. So now an artist can log on to your website or download your mobile app and they can get their songs on platforms. That's what they're looking for. And that's how you accomplish that. Then there's distribution companies that will provide label services, right? So these are a little bit more hands-on and give artists access to playlisting, for instance, or might give you white glove distribution where now you're able to communicate to someone instead of having to go through a customer service portal, right? And I think like there's a space for an artist that is already established themselves and just needs a little bit access is what they need, right? They need access and also promotion at the DSP level. So those are areas where a distribution company can differentiate themselves. And then the third way is, a distribution company that provides full-on services, right? So for instance, UnitedMasters, the way that we differentiate ourselves in the space is our partnerships with the major brands, right? So part of UnitedMasters is a creative agency, award-winning creative agency called Translation. So when our CEO and founder started the company, he wanted to be able to provide access to major brand dollars for independent artists. Historically, you had to, if you was at a major label, you had to be the top tier of artists to be able to get brand dollars, so to get a brand deal. And we wanted to be able to eliminate that. And he did that early on with a partnership with NBA. And through that partnership, the NBA came to our platform to be able to use independent artists' music, whether it was on social, whether it was in broadcast, and also create opportunities to integrate music into their programming, like at like at All-Star Weekend, right? So from opportunities like the NBA leading to Beats by Dre, to American Eagle, to State Farm, we've created a pipeline for artists or a bridge essentially for artists to be able to get their music into brand deals and sync opportunities. So that's the way that we've differentiated ourselves. And, we've worked hard to develop a tech product that allows artists to distribute their music from their phone, to be able to have transparency around the streaming data, aggregating the streams from Spotify, Apple, and YouTube, to be able to see their financials, right? I think one of the areas in the business that was always a little murky was understanding how much an artist has made. So we brought transparency around monthly statements all the way down to the DSP platform level. In addition to that, launched tools for artists to essentially run their business with us as their backend. So when you think about what are the things that artists need, our CEO has always said that artists need a CTO, right? And we serve as that CTO for artists. So as we have new innovation, whether you want to split payment to your collaborators, or you want to receive an advance on your future royalties through our partnerships with Beat Bread and Paper Chain, you can do that all through our platform.
Man, so you're talking about a company that has award-winning, creative agency inside and translation, and even for context, like Steve Stout, as it relates to hip hop, has so many cool moments, and it's been behind some great advertising moments. I think about that Reebok commercial with AI and Jadakiss and stuff like that, right? It's just like those crazy moments that last forever. But you touched on a couple of things, right? You said UnitedMasters providing some data, aggregating some data for you, allowing you to sort of go out there, maybe see what markets you need to tour at. You guys are, I don't know if you hit this, but you could split your royalties up a little bit, right? So if you have a producer you need to pay, you could do that from the platform. And then if you are a select group of artists, and you might have access to some of the advertising and creative tools that you just kind of spoke about with some of those brands. And, I think some of my clients have even been a beneficiary of some 2K stuff, right? NBA 2K, getting those sync deals. With all that being said, what's in it for I guess, and distributors, and what does this mean long term? Is this like the future business model of the record industry?
Yeah, I mean, like the business has been. If you try to dissect the business, and I know this is a room full of professors and potentially attorneys, right? There's always these areas where there's gray area in the music business, right? There's a lot of things don't make sense. Why do producers get paid, but then not the songwriter up front, right? Like there's so many different areas that there's no real transparency or really rhyme or reason why it's done that way. And I think that creates an opportunity for technology to be able to kind of solve that, right? And I think that's where we're ultimately charging towards, right? We want to be that CTO for a lot of artists. And in a lot of ways, we're doing that through our platform, right? Creating creator tools for artists to be able to promote themselves, to be able to expand their audience, right? But then also to be able to create music. Last week, we launched a beat marketplace in partnership with Hit Boy, right? So now an artist can start their music journey from via our app before they even distribute, right? They can go on and buy and sell beats if you're a producer. And then, once you distribute your music, artists need tools to be able to promote themselves, right? So we're actively creating more and more tools so that way artists can then build community. And I think like that's where there's a lot in that, right? Like even when you start to kind of see where NFTs have come about, like it's all about community. And as an artist, you're when you're beginning out or beginning in your career, you ultimately trying to find those raving fans. Like, so if you can get to 1,000 raving fans, that's where you can create a career for yourselves and have a good amount of traction. And I think like whether you're the superstar artist, the 1% of artists that has high streaming numbers, or you're the DIY artist that just wants to make a couple $1,000s a month to be able to supplement their income, music distribution has allowed that. And distribution platforms like UnitedMasters and other platforms out there are allowing artists to be able to do that. So I think it's a lot of different tools. So for us, creator tools, and then also giving artists more tools and access to ways to promote themselves and build their community around them.
Yep, and you hit on a couple things I want to talk about next. And you talk about kind of being the wanting to be the CTO for artists and their companies that they're building. Speaks a lot about independence and ownership, right? What do those things mean? I think to you, and how is new technology, Web3, blockchain, even TikTok, how is that affecting sort of the artists that are coming to UN's platform? Is it democratizing things? Like, what's sort of your view on it?
Yeah. Well, I think like it starts with innovation, right? Like, so as new technology is launching and artists are always being creative, right? Like when you think about last year or 2 years ago, 2020 and the pandemic, technology is what got a lot of artists and creatives through that terrible time, right? We was living through times where we've never seen before here around the world. So technology allowed for artists to be able to say, look, I want to take my side hustle or my passion and put that to the forefront, and I want to use it to be able to monetize and be able to create additional revenue that I can survive through this time, right? And that's why technology is so important. And you have to think about all these different platforms that come out. There's different ways to use them, right? So during 2020, TikTok was the biggest catalyst to some of the biggest records, right? Because now you had artists that was teasing out a 15-second clip, but then they was building so much traction from that, right? So ultimately, it now created a new promotional vehicle for artists to be able to build their audience, their fan base, and build popularity. So early on, we partnered with TikTok to be able to give creators who were uploading original sounds on TikTok the ability to be able to then distribute those to the major DSPs, right? So you uploaded a song to TikTok, right? And you start to see that it's trending. And we partnered with TikTok so that way they can then deliver it to Spotify and Apple and YouTube and all the streaming platforms and be able to monetize that, right? It's always thinking about like, how do we bridge the gap between technology and then the fans, right? So even with blockchain, everyone's been talking about, cryptocurrency, right? And how does cryptocurrency interact with music? And one of the things that we recognized was that artists wanted to have new ways to be able to receive their royalties, right? So we partnered with Coinbase so that way artists can receive their money in cryptocurrency. And for a lot of people in the United States, it's like, well, why would I take something that my royalties in something that is so risky or and not certain what the value of the crypto is. But what we saw was that in emerging markets, in places like Venezuela or in Africa, artists that was using our platform, they wanted to have alternative ways so that they can actually access their funds, right? And when you think about what technology is doing for the business, it's bridging the gap all across the world and creating opportunity and ultimately access for artists that want to be able to monetize their art.
Man, you're hitting on a lot of good stuff here, and I want to unpack it a little bit more. But I want to kind of shift gears and kind of talk about what all this means, I guess, for education, right? I think when you're talking about distribution, new models, you being an executive at I call one of the more disruptive music companies around right now. What education, I guess, do you think needs to change, right? At the university level, because I know you've spoken at a bunch of music business programs. I'm a professor as well at that university level, and a lot of people here are professors. What needs to change? I guess what part of the education or curriculum needs to change, right? About a lot of times people are getting pushed to the traditional model. You got to work at a record. A lot of kids I talk to in my class, they think, hey, you gotta work at the record label and go that way. What do you think needs to change at the education level?
Yeah, I think it's communicating that there's options, right? And there's a lot of ways for you to be creative and think about the business in new ways, right? And there once was only one way for you to be, or a few ways for you to become successful in the business, and you hit on it. It's like if you wanted to be successful in the music business, you have to either work at a record company, be an attorney, or offer a service to some of these artists. And today, you don't have to do an internship at the record company to get your start into music, right? There's music tech companies. There's platforms that are creating tools for artists. There's artist managers that are building, artist careers around multiple artists that they're not only making revenue from their music royalties, but they're also looking at their artists as creators, right? So they're making money from brands, whether they're making posts on social media or different platforms. So, at the education level, it's just communicating that there's different opportunities out in the business, right? And independence and ownership is a way that you can be successful, and the ownership of IP, which is something that I'm sure IP is taught at that level, and really educating the students on the importance of having ownership over their IP, right? When you look at a lot of companies that are exiting in the music space, they're exiting because they own the IP, right? And in a lot of cases, the artists don't see the fruits of their art, So owning something like your masters in music, if you become successful, it is something that can be passed on to different generations and create legacies for your family, and then also build other businesses from it. So, I think it's just showing the different options and the perspectives that, as this music industry has gone global and we're using technology to bridge the gap, it doesn't have to be predatory in the business anymore. And it's not one size fit all. And there's options for artists. There's options for executives, for creatives to be successful without having to be the top 1% of creatives and artists and executives in the business.
Yep. And I guess even more specifically, what skills do you think students need to sort of focus on? Some might be A&R, some might be managers, some might be, record label execs, music execs, some might be the artists or producers themselves. What skills do you think the next batch of music business students need to focus on?
Yeah, well, I think it starts with them being resourceful, right? I think a lot of times you graduate school and you're assuming that the job of your dreams is going to just kind of fall in your lap, where the reality is that you have to constantly be educating yourself and you have to be resourceful. So I remember when the business was changing in 2009 or 2012, the business was changing and moving more towards streaming platforms. I almost had to go back to school, right? I had to educate myself on this new technology and understand now you can see the audience data for where the fans are, right? I can dive into streaming numbers and really be able to build campaigns from those insights, right? But I had to educate myself, whether it was reading literature, watching YouTube videos. So that's one of the things that I think you have to have some tenacity and then also be resourceful. But then also identify what you're passionate about, right? Every artist, everyone in the business doesn't have to be the creative. You can be the operational minded person, right? So it's leaning into learning the operational tools and not starting at the top. You have to build your way up, right? And ultimately, the third piece is being able to ask questions and build a community of people at your level, and not just always trying to network upwards and get mentors. You want to have mentors that are side by side with you, which are people that you can call on that can help you along your journey. So I think when you ask the question, what skills or what kind of tools do students need nowadays, it's just being resourceful and being resourceful to build relationships, having the tenacity to go out and find the information, and then ask smart questions. And that's ultimately, and one of the pieces, starting where they are, right? Don't think that the situation has to be perfect around you or you have to have the job in order to start. Start practicing those things that you wanted to be to make your career, and ultimately you'll find your way in the door.
Yeah, no doubt. And I think I want to push a little bit more there. So if you're you mentioned a few things today, right? You talked about data, right? Analytics, and using those, to benefit. We talked about distribution, obviously, a little bit about the future of an artist deal. But I guess if there are three areas to focus on, right? I mean, I think the last batch of, executives, maybe 20 years ago, their focus might have been on old school A&R, radio, things like that. What about now? If you were teaching a class, you're at one of the more disruptive companies, in music. What would you say? What were a couple things you should focus on? If I were you, I would focus on these two things. Not necessarily a skill, it could be an industry inside the industry, something like that.
Yeah. To your point, A&R has changed significantly as well, right? Where A&R used to be talent scouts and then also developing music in the studio, right? And really figuring out the strategy around how to chart the course of the artist's career. But there's a new element to A&R now, which is research, right? Where so if you're a really strong with data tools, you can now become a A&R researcher, right? Which is so important now in all these different technology platforms, these streaming platforms. You have an A&R research department that is analyzing data, crunching numbers, and making contact with the artist. In a lot of cases, the first point of contact from a company like a distribution company or a label. So there's an opportunity there for people, for students. Then you mentioned radio promo, right? There's not that many, young radio promo people in the business. If you walked into a record company, most of the people who do radio promo are, later in their career, right? But what you do see is that you'll see a lot of young kids inside the digital marketing department, right? This is an area that probably is about 10 years old, right? When you think about it, it's, how do you build an audience on your socials? What kind of content do you post on the socials? What's the frequency of posting, right? And then how do I amplify it once I start posting it, right? That department is so key to be able to get a message out online. And I think that is a new area of the business where we'll start to see a lot of innovation and a lot of students really starting to lean into that area. And then also new technologies, right? Being able to think about the tools that, not where the music business is today, but how do we build the tools for the future, right? So there's still room for innovation. And we've seen that in the last 2 years, just the way that records are building. 4 years ago, you got a record by Cole Bennett or video from Cole Bennett and Lyrical Lemonade. You started to build traction, right? Then a year after that, TikTok. If you got the right influencer, Charlie D'Amelio or Dixie D'Amelio to do a dance to your song, then you start to build traction, right? So the business is changing so fast, and the more keen you are to leaning into new technologies and really lean into those areas, you can create a space for yourself, and that adds value to the artist community. So it's really understanding what the artist needs, and then thinking about what they will need in the future as they're crossing the chasm.
Man, that's a lot of good stuff right there. I want to get back to sort of, your marketing journey and sort of what you guys are creating at which I think is really unique, right? I think there's a couple approaches that you guys utilize. And one is the education piece, right? I mean, I think is definitely a leader in creative education, to just free stuff that, comes to your email or out on social. I almost feel like you guys are doing a good job of educating for people to even see the value of a What is that purposeful? I mean, do you guys sit in strategy meetings and really say, hey, we have to really, make people more sophisticated about tech in business before they even understand our product?
Yeah, I mean, it's you can't just tell everyone you should be independent, right? Because then they're like, well, how do I become successful independent? You have to also give them the tools and then give them the education so that they can be successful while they're on a journey of maintaining ownership of their copyrights and ownership of their art, So it was important for us to create platforms and tools that started off as webinars, right? We went to all the different streaming platforms and all the social platforms like Instagram and TikTok and got their artist relations rep to do a webinar for our artist community. So we were seeing thousands of artists try to sign up for this webinar, and it was breaking Zoom. So we created a 2-day virtual conference called SelectCon that we launched in the middle of the pandemic, and ultimately brought thought leaders from around the business to host a conference and share free game essentially for young creatives and artists. And it's so important for us to be able to share the insights, and I think like that's one of the things that I didn't have when I was coming into business, is access to the information to know when I'm signing a publishing deal, what I'm actually giving away, right? I remember when I signed my first publishing deal for one of my clients, I didn't realize that you only get 50% up front, right? And then the attorney or, the business manager was commissioning off of the full amount of the deal, right? At the front end. So by the time the artist made their money, it was significantly less than what they, after expenses, they bought a car, took care of some family, and now 6 months down the line, they was waiting to recoup 75% of the total deal in order to get the second half of their payment, right? Like, so these are things that I had no way of understanding because no one was breaking down these concepts to me. So if we can provide the access to the information for artists, it goes a long way so that we're empowering the next generation of artists, executives, and creators.
Man, we're starting to get some audience member questions rolling in. So I'll ask one more and get to the audience questions. The future, I don't want to be too vague, but kind of uses phrases like record label in your pocket. The future is independent. What's in you in 10, I think you talked about even the game kind of flipped up on its head 10 years ago, 12 years ago, right? Where we kind of went from physicals to streaming, and, it was the piracy stage in between then. And, in 10 years, what do you think the relationship between technology, artists and their teams, and distro companies and record labels will be? Like, what is the future? You say the future, says the future is independent. What does that look like to you?
Yeah, I think across the board, deals are going to change. Even major label deals we've seen have started to change, right? The way that they're structuring their deals. And, I think there's going to be a hybrid model for a lot of companies where some companies are providing services, right? And artists are going to be going to different companies for a la carte. When you think about it, like a lot of the as an independent distribution company, when we're running campaigns for artists, we're seeing that the same vendors we're using are the same vendors that the major labels are using, right? So when you are as an independent artist, you are now able to bring the right partners around your business that that are best for your team and your business, and access to capital is going to be easier, right? So being able to get advances on your future royalties are going to be more easier to access. So I believe that the business is going to continue to innovate itself. Technology is going to allow for that. But as an independent artist, it's going, when you start building traction and you're going to be able to build a business to be able to say what happens to your copyrights when you have requests like as simple as sync opportunities, right? You'll be able to control those copyrights and those rights and your rights. So I think the business is going to continue to innovate on the technology side, and it's going to create more opportunities for new companies to emerge and offer these different services and tools for artists.
Yeah, competition is a great thing in this sense, man. There's so many different companies and cool tech companies popping up in the music side that, innovation it's long overdue. And you guys doing a great job at pushing it forward. From an audience member, can you provide, speaking of socials and working with student artists and our managers, can you provide some insights into your approach to developing an artist brand and persona?
Yeah, definitely. I tell my team all the time, it starts with who that artist is, right? And ultimately, the campaigns that have been the most successful are the campaigns where we're really authentic to who the artist is. So we always start with the narrative and build a narrative that we then communicate through drivers, what the marketing drivers are, right? And then we find tactics within all of the marketing drivers that we push out. So when you think about social media, it's about the artist creating content or communicating in a voice that is authentic to themselves and finding those 5 fans first, right? And really understanding what they respond to, and then grow those 5 fans to 20, right? By paying attention to what they're responding to, what time you're posting on social and how they're interacting with it. What kind of content does it push to the explore page because you post that kind of content? And just really thinking about optimization. I think that's when you're really clear on what your narrative is that you're pushing out as an artist, and it takes time for artists to find that and to kind of really lean into that. But once they find it, they can then push that through their whole marketing campaign, whether it's on social, whether it's on digital campaigns, whether it's on activations or experiential. You can literally take that through the whole artist journey. Like there's an artist that's been coming up on my radar named Willow Alvalon. She started with a possum. She found a possum and then she grew the possum. So she built a persona around this girl, who is basically catering to this possum, right? And in her music videos, the possum is there on social media, and she's created an alternate personality with this possum. And, fans are now gravitating towards the possum, which is now driving visibility for her campaign, et cetera. So it's really just finding your narrative and finding a through line that you can then take through all your campaign.
And it seems like you can do that stuff without a label or without a bigger company behind you. Is that, I kind of think that's what and you sort of allude to in a lot of the marketing you put out, right? Like, I think, back in the day, maybe a label or a partner, you had to build that community, kind of together. Now it almost feels like a lot of community and strategies being built, and then people are partnering, or signing to record labels, which is unique. Is that what you're seeing? And if not, kind of, I guess, break down the sort of deal, what you're seeing out there in the ecosystem.
Yeah, absolutely. Like back in the day, you needed to sign to a major label to be able to find an audience, right? Now artists are finding their audience before they're going into a deal. And the reason is because of social, right? They're leveraging social to build audiences, and then which is transferring to the streaming platforms. And then the A&R research departments at the major labels are then reaching out to the artists after they've hit a certain threshold, right? So the artist development, the early artist development is not happening in the same way that it happened 20, 30 years ago. Artists are developing themselves and understanding how to communicate to their audience and build traction. And a lot of these young artists are really intelligent and are very much aware of what it takes for them to build their traction, right? Like you can't sit in an office and tell an artist, like, you need to do this every single time, because you're not inside the profile. You're not inside that person's account to be able to tell them what is actually working. So there's tools, third-party tools that we can use to kind of measure it, but it really has to be authentic to them, right? Like, I can tell you how to optimize it, right? I can tell you ideas to be able to build traction. But ultimately, you have to be naturally able to create that content and engaging with your audience and your fan and creating them, converting them to fans. So absolutely, 100%. I think like the dynamics between having to sign to a major to find the audience has changed significantly.
Yeah. And I couldn't agree more. And I think that's sort of, the amount of a lot of those viral moments you talked about via TikTok, that's usually artists and their teams, right? And things sort of pick up organically. Last question for me is, you if you were, and we kind of touched on this a little bit, earlier, but curriculum, super important. I think education is even, you guys have done a great job of creating education. And, we kind of alluded a little bit on what you want to see in classrooms and coursework. But, again, if you were a student, what new classes, right? Like what new curriculum do you want to see from professors, out there? I think there's so much room for growth in new media, music, and technology, but maybe the courses aren't there yet. From somebody at a disruptor, what courses do you want to see? What emphasis? Where do you want to see the students taking, getting their education from?
Yeah, I would love to see community building courses, right? I think like that's the key. And as independent music is steadily growing and surpassing the recorded music at major labels, it's going to be important for artists to learn how to build their community to be successful. When you think about creators outside of music, whether you're a beauty blogger, whether you have you're a botanist, creating an online community around, your plants, I think it's going to be important for you to understand what draws people into your content. How do you cater to that audience? How do you incentivize them to continue to stay with you? And then how do you get them to be your amplifiers that's going to tell more people about you, right? And I think that there's a science behind it, but it's really simple. I think that's one of the areas that you can apply not only in the music business, but apply into different industries as well. So on the artist side, absolutely building community, and then audience development is an extension of that. And then how to communicate. Like there's building the Raven fan group. It's going to be super important.
Yeah, awesome. We actually got a few more audience questions here. My favorite podcast, and any favorite podcast or book suggestions or online resources that you could recommend for either students or faculty to stay on top of the industry?
Yeah, definitely. One of my favorite books is not two favorite books. It's not a music industry book, but it's Contagious by Jonah Berger, and then Smart Cuts by I think it's Shane Snow. Those two books were integral in just me opening the way that I thought about the business, right? And I think to be successful in the music business in the future, you can't just be a music industry person. You have to be thinking about the intersection between music, tech, and culture. So just being abreast of those things is important. One of the podcasts that I like is Dan Runcie has a podcast that he talks about music industry trends. And then Music Business Worldwide has or Chart Metrics has a really good podcast. And then Earn Your Leisure, right? So the guys at Earn Your Leisure have built a strong podcast on financial literacy that, is built for entrepreneurs. And as the businesses continue to change, you have to be thinking like an entrepreneur every single day.
Awesome. A few more here. Okay. How do we get students to get excited about possibly joining a startup type environment when all they think about is going to a major or working for their favorite artists?
Yeah. I mean, my team, I've been able to recruit and build my team by telling them that what we're building on a daily basis, they'll be able to kind of see the fruits of their labor in real time. When you're in a startup, of course, it's very hectic. At times, resources are limited, but you have the ability to be able to think outside the box. When I worked at a major label, I worked at it for 14 months. I worked at a major label, 15 months within the Roc Nation system. And what I saw by being in the universal music system was that if I had a big, wild, crazy idea, I had to go through so many checks and balances. And it was like trying to change the path of a cruise ship. Once you get on the cruise ship, you have to go to the destination. A startup pivots all the time. So if you see an opportunity that is going to benefit the business, you can pitch it and then you can move swiftly. And then a lot of times be very nimble, so that is one of the reasons why I love the startup culture. And, in the startup culture, you're actively trying to find new ways of doing business. You really want to innovate. So that's one of the biggest bonuses for me being in a startup culture. And I would encourage artists and also young graduates to consider a startup atmosphere, because it allows you to be entrepreneurial, and taking that hat into a major company as an entrepreneur at that point could be very beneficial.
I want to piggyback on that question. You have experience as a manager as well, and then obviously, as you said, working at sort of the major ecosystem at Roc Nation. How did those experience? Do you think it's important for students to have that experience too, or do you think you need that?
I'm sorry, I missed it was breaking up a little bit.
Do you need that sort of record label or management experience? How valuable is that as well? I mean, obviously you had experience as a manager, and then you went to Roc Nation, and then you kind of got to the maybe the more techie startup, world of your job, of your life.
Well, I think like a lot of the education is, can be learned in a lot of different ways. You don't have to do it from working inside the institution. Like there's a lot of different resources that are on platforms like YouTube, and then by experimenting and trying in real time, whether you're offering a service to an artist, is a way for you to kind of really start building credibility. Like we're hiring vendors that have never worked inside of a company before, right? We're hiring art directors who freelance for a living. We're hiring digital marketing kids who just became really good at TikTok. The person who runs a lot of our TikTok campaigns is 19 years old, has never worked a job in their life, right? So there's so much opportunity for students to be able to like think outside the box, right? Leverage the education that you gained in college, but then take that like ingenuity and just that innovation and curiosity, and then try to bend the lines a little bit to get through the door. I told my team today, I was like, there should be a class called Finesse 101, right? And that's essentially just thinking outside the box. Like, how do you get to yes, right? How do you turn no to a yes? How do you get to the same result that you need, maybe by reverse engineering it? So I don't think you have to go through a major label. I don't think that you have to be a manager. I think that you can be resourceful and be creative, and think outside the box and have curiosity and become successful in the business.
This is another good question that sort of piggybacks right off what you just said. What's important for someone to bring to the table to complement the work that you do? And otherwise, what traits are you looking for, when you're hiring somebody, at a UM?
Yeah, I'm looking for people to bring onto my team that are better at areas that I'm weak, right? Early on in my career, I was really strong organizational, right? Where I had every single detail, I documented everything. But then as I start getting pulled into different conversations and I'm pulled into creative conversations, I'm not able to be as organized as possible, right? So when I hire, I look for people who are young, organized, also look for people who are creative, people who are tapped into the culture, whether it's music or technology, or really savvy on social media. And I'm always looking for areas, looking for people who are strong in areas that I'm not. So I think that just across the board, it's important when you're building your team to cast the team, right? It's like I have to have, like, I use sports analogies a lot, but the basketball team has 5-star players, but everyone is good at a different position. Someone's playing the post, someone's playing the wing, and then you have a facilitator, which is your point guard. And you have to think about your team in the same way.
Got it. We're getting down to the final moments here. Really kind of wanted to just open it up to you. Any final notes, remarks, or things you want to leave people with today? Where do you think the industry is going in this field? Any last thoughts?
Yeah, no, I mean, one, I'm really excited that there's the organization MEIEA, and just to hear, as I've read up about the organization, to see how many schools had music business programs. Back when I was in school, going to school in 2002, there wasn't that many music programs, business programs. I knew from the time I was 18 years old that I wanted to be in the business, but I got a business administration degree. So the fact that there's organization and there's professors around the country that are teaching the business is so impactful. And I think that as we continue to educate the next generation of music industry professionals and leaders and executives and grooming them, that we are also talking about the innovation that's happening right before our eyes. And we're providing them with different tools and access and resources so that they can be entrepreneurial and build businesses, build the next Universal Music Group because they're thinking outside the box, build the next TikTok, be the next Daniel Ek, and build the next Spotify. I think that the professors on this call have the ability to be able to inspire and educate and give the students the tools and resources that is needed to be able to do that. So thank you for having me on the program today.
Thanks, Dave. Dave, this was awesome. And, I learned a lot even talking to you today, and looking forward to see what you build personally and what you're building at UM, and, sort of the innovation and, being at the crossroads of music, tech, and everything in between. So appreciate your words today. And I'm sure everybody else does on this call.
Nice. Thanks, Carl. Thanks, everyone.